Big news coming out of China today, and we want to check in with our friend Gordon Chang. He's the author of The Coming Collapse of China, and also you can follow him on Twitter. Really vital insights on his Twitter feed. It's Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Well, I talk about your Twitter feed, which is now a social media platform that seems a little bit freer because of Elon Musk's ownership. The same cannot be said for TikTok, and we're now seeing state governments and even nations banning the use of TikTok. Is that the prudent way to go here, Gordon? I know you've been raising the alarm for a while.
Yeah, there's only two acceptable solutions for TikTok in the United States. One of them is to ban it completely, and the other is to force a sale to an American owner who then also controls the algorithm. The Trump administration tried to force a sale, and the sale didn't crater on price, is really what the normal sticking point would be. But it was the control of the algorithm, which determines what TikTok users see and what they don't see.
Yeah.
And the reason why that was so important is because China uses TikTok to amplify its propaganda in the United States. And so this is a critical matter for the Communist Party.
I've also seen people, Gordon, claim that, in China, kids looking at TikTok will see a celebration of young teenagers who are excelling academically or athletically and really sort of the best of the best. Where in America, I mean, I don't know how to put this, but you see the opposite. You see sort of the dregs of American culture celebrated. Is that because that's what Americans are looking for, or is the algorithm sort of forcing that narrative on our kids?
It's both. But we have to understand the importance of what China's trying to do. So, for instance, it's used TikTok to foment violence on American streets. It did that in 2020. And that's more than just subversion, Larry. That's an act of war because it was done with the People's Liberation Army participation.
Yeah.
But also TikTok glorifies drug use, pushes critical race theory. Last year, China used TikTok to push Russian disinformation about the Ukraine war.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really important propaganda tool. And you're right. In China, the sister site of TikTok is called Douyin, and it is, of course, patriotic, quote unquote.
Gordon, I've also heard you over the last year or so, or even more maybe, warning about the influence of money from the Chinese Communist Party on our college campuses. And that, of course, was thrust back into the headlines a couple of weeks ago when we learned about the Penn Biden Center, the classified documents, and how much money came from the Communist Chinese for that center and at the University of Pennsylvania. Expand on that, would you, and why this is such an important issue?
The University of Pennsylvania, among other elite schools, has been taking a lot of Chinese money, even before the establishment of the Penn Biden Center, after Joe Biden left the vice presidency. But when Penn established the Penn Biden Center, what happened is that Chinese contributions to the University of Pennsylvania like tripled or something like that. And Biden got essentially a no-show job at the Penn Biden Center. And so although it's very difficult to say there's a direct connection, obviously there was one. This is a very Chinese way of doing things. And that means that the Beijing found another way to shovel money into the pockets of the Biden family.
Well, and of course, the Trump administration was investigating this influence from the Communist Party of China on our college campuses. Even Christopher Wray, the FBI director, said that it was a good and important investigation. Joe Biden, within, I think, the first month or two of becoming president, he called a halt to that investigation. Was that a mistake? And is that worth investigating?
Yeah, you're talking about the China Initiative, that the FBI focused on Chinese penetration, especially of colleges and universities in the U.S. And the Department of Justice says, well, we're still doing the same thing. It's just that we're not using a name which attracts criticism. But I think that it should have continued the China Initiative because we have to recognize the threat from China. And also it gave a focus and it was a subtle message to the FBI that this was a priority of the Biden administration. By ending the China Initiative, which the Trump administration started, as you pointed out, they're basically saying China had open season on the U.S. and that if you were in the FBI, China, don't bother about going after them.
Well, there is a suggestion that any investigation into influence coming from the nation of China is in some way going to be extrapolated to sort of a racist view that anyone of Chinese or Asian descent is in some way nefarious or an enemy of the people. I mean, I don't know how many times it needs to be said. Chinese Americans who fled the authoritarian regime came here and embraced our liberty, embraced our freedoms. They're not a problem. They're not the enemy. Why is it so hard to for the left to sort of discern that and make that distinction?
Well, not being on the left, it's hard for me to put myself in their minds. But, you know, we saw this, for instance, when the House voted to form the Select Committee on China. There were 65 dissenting votes, all from Democrats. And you had one member of the squad, Ayanna Pressler, actually say, well, this would engender anti-Chinese American hate. As a Chinese American, I'm particularly sensitive to these things, as you might imagine. I don't think there's any connection. Matter of fact, I think when Chinese Americans fly the flag of an enemy, which communist China is, I think that it actually causes other Americans to question our presence in this country. So I think it's actually the opposite. And by the way, I would say that this can't be racist, Larry, because obviously we have reasons to investigate China. And if you didn't do it, the only reason would be because of the race of the attackers. So not having the Select Committee would be racist.
Fascinating point, and you're absolutely, I mean, that just stands to reason. I'd like to finish with this new report that came out today from China with regard to their population decline, the first time since 1961, since the Cultural Revolution under Mao. To what do you attribute this population decline in China, and is this a problem for them in terms of their future and their economic power?
This is a critical problem because China is going to face the steepest demographic decline in history in the absence of war or disease. A country which was 1.4 billion people is probably going to be under 500 million people at the end of this century. And clearly, we just don't know what's going to happen. There are many reasons for it. You know, as a country becomes more prosperous, it generally tends to become fewer, the total fertility rate tends to drop. But here it's, of course, the one-child policy that was in effect between 1980 and 2015 that drilled into the Chinese people that you should only have one child. But also, even though China now has a three-child policy, because of economic problems, because of pessimism in China, because of COVID, people just don't want to have children. So China has one of the lowest total fertility rates in anywhere in the world.
Wow. And real quickly, and only have 30 seconds, but they also still have a drastic male to female ratio there. You need a lot of women to replenish your birth rate. And that also is a result of the one-child policy because of the devastating choices with regard to young female babies that were born, right?
Absolutely. And females in China are not getting married. And in China, that's important because you can't get a birth permit unless you're married. 44% of urban Chinese women have said they never want to get married, according to a Communist Party poll.
Wow. So all these authoritarian decisions that sort of stifled human behavior, even fundamental human behaviors like procreating, they're now coming home to roost. Interesting.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Gordon
Absolutely,
Chang.
Larry.
We got to leave it there. Always good to talk with you. We'll be watching you on Twitter. It's Gordon G. Chang. You're watching Salem News Channel. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.